Hi everyone, and welcome to Windrider Farm. In today's video, I'd like to show you the greenhouse we recently built in one of the hidden gardens and what we've been growing inside. Last season, we showed how we were starting to restore several gardens that had been abandoned in this field 12 years ago due to an issue we were having with deer and groundhogs constantly eating everything. But last season, we decided to try growing here again because it is such a beautiful spot with lots of good sunlight. So after we cleared out all of the overgrowth, the first thing that we did was build a greenhouse. Like the other greenhouses we've built here on our homestead, this one was built for less than $300 using free wood and some purchased materials. We presently have a total of 4 greenhouses that we use to grow a variety of different vegetables and plants, and all of the greenhouses are unheated, and our farm is located in Zone 5. Later in the season, we'll be growing several varieties of peppers inside this greenhouse, but for now, we're using it to germinate hundreds of heirloom tomato seeds and to grow out the seedlings to planting size. Now some of you may be wondering, how is it possible to germinate tomato seeds in an unheated greenhouse in Zone 5? And if you're from the Northeast, you know the nights here are very cold, and even the daytime temperatures are far too cold to germinate any seeds outside. So keeping that in mind, why didn't we just germinate them using heat mats and trays and then grow them under grow lights until they're all ready to go outside? And the answer is because we like to experiment and try to push the boundaries of what's possible when growing our plants. We live in an area with a very short growing season, so we try to grow as much as we can in greenhouses, and we try to plant as much as we can in them when it's impossible to grow anything outside because it's too cold. So we got the idea to try germinating tomato seeds in this greenhouse by watching volunteer tomato seedlings pop up in the beds of our tomato greenhouse early last year. So we thought, why don't we just try to duplicate what was already happening naturally without our intervention? One thing we noticed was that the volunteer tomato seedlings were so much more hardy than the little delicate tomato seedlings we'd grown inside. There was also no need to harden them off because they had germinated and even grown in less than ideal temperatures. So in early April, we finished building this greenhouse and decided to start the seed germinating experiment. We built a large bed in the center with the thought that we could use it as a germination bed first, and then use it to grow peppers or tomatoes in the heat of summer, and then in the fall use it to grow cool season vegetables and try to see how long they would keep growing even when it was below freezing outside. We also built the same trough system we had built in our other greenhouses along the sides, where we'll be growing peas in the spring and cucumbers and pole beans in the summer. The cucumbers or beans will take the place of shade cloth in offering the plants in the bed a bit of shade in the heat of summer. One thing we did know would be costly is filling such a large bed with soil, so we had to get creative to lower the cost. So the first thing that we decided to do was fill the bottom third of the bed with semi-broken down cardboard. The cardboard would help fill the bed and would also stay moist and attract earthworms. So we used all of this cardboard we had gathered from the garden outside the greenhouse. We'd put it down in the spring of last year to suppress all the weeds that were growing there. So after we put down the cardboard, we filled the bed with our own compost. Our compost is made up of leaves, twigs, weeds from the gardens, and used soil from pots we had grown plants in the previous season. We then topped off our compost with a high-quality bagged raised bed soil. We were able to fill this large raised bed for about $50. And as you can see from all of the mushrooms that we find have popped up around the seedlings every morning, this is very healthy soil. We put all of our heirloom tomato seeds on top of the soil, and then we covered them with about 1/4 of an inch of fine vermiculite. So after we filled the bed, all we had left to do was address the extreme temperature fluctuations of spring if we were going to be able to successfully germinate our tomato seeds. When the sun is shining, the daytime temperature inside the greenhouse is usually 20 to 30 degrees above the outside temperature. But what about the cold nights and the days that are cloudy and cold? What we found is that if we put a layer of plastic over the raised bed and then covered that with a frost cloth, the temperature inside the raised bed is about 20 degrees higher than the temperature inside the greenhouse. We kept track of the temperatures by using these inexpensive thermometers and a small notebook, so we could adjust our growing in the future seasons by using the information that we gathered this first season. We now know it's possible to grow inside this raised bed in this unheated greenhouse, even when the temperatures inside and outside are below freezing. So some of our friends have asked us, now that we have this bed full of little seedlings, isn't it hard to separate them when they're growing in clumps, and do they get damaged? And the answer is no. It's actually very easy, and tomato plants are very forgiving to being separated from each other when they're growing together in a clump. All we do is use a wide mayonnaise knife to cut the soil around the clump, and then use the knife to gently lift it from the surrounding soil. We then reach under the clump of seedlings, being careful to keep the whole clump intact, until we transport it over to the tray where we'll separate the seedlings. Once inside the tray, we gently shake the excess soil away from the roots, making it easier to separate the plants. Once the excess soil has been removed and the plants have been gently separated, we pot them up into a high-quality organic potting mix. We fill our pots in advance so the little roots of these tiny tomato plants are not out of the soil for very long. We quickly place them in the center of the pot we have filled halfway with our potting mix, and then gently fill up the pot around the little plant until the soil almost reaches the lowest set of leaves. Using this method, we can safely and quickly pot up many little tomato seedlings in a very short period of time. They'll continue to grow inside for a bit until it's time to bring them outside. So far, our little greenhouse germination experiment is doing well, and we hope it inspires you to try a little experimenting when growing your plants, and that it maybe even inspires you to build a greenhouse of your own. We'll be sharing another video soon showing how we're restoring this garden outside the greenhouse and what we'll be growing this season.